the Commanders had a lot of things happening in the offseason. I mean, the Schneider situation, ownership, and the stories coming out, and they're getting sued. The NFL's getting sued, all the craziness. But this team, on paper, is a pretty good team. They gave McLaurin a pretty good contract, as well as he deserves if he could stay on the field. They brought in Carson Wentz. They have a pretty good defense. In the second half, they were a defense that really stood out from all the rest. Where is this team? I mean, we talk about the Eagles, the Giants, the Cowboys. Where does this team line up from all the other teams?
To me, they're the second tier in the NFC and probably the NFC East as well. They are loaded on offense. For all the knocks that Carson Wentz gets, he's a good quarterback. There's if you look at the teams in the league, obviously there's 32 teams, but there's probably only 24, 25 guys who are really good NFL quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz is one of them. He had a couple of bad years, but for the most part, most of his seasons are 3,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He can play, and he's got a strong arm, and he's smart. So that right away transforms their offense. They've got Terry McLaurin, they've got Curtis Samuel, they've got Jahan Dotson, 3 good receivers, Logan Thomas at tight end, 2 good running backs. That's more than a lot of teams. So they can move the ball. They can score. I don't know how well they can stop teams. The first 2 weeks, the defense has not looked great. Without Chase Young, I worry a little bit about that pass rush. So, to put them on the top tier, to say that they can compete with the Eagles for the NFC East title, I need to see a little more about the defense. But, put them in a shootout with anybody, I'm not ruling out Carson Wentz and that offensive weapons. They've got some talent there.
I will say this. And I'm looking back on Frank Wright over there in Indianapolis. I don't think he's very happy right now with Matt Ryan. I think he'd be in a better position if he had Carson Wentz. So, big mistake by Indianapolis. That's just my
They wouldn't
opinion.
have gotten shut out by the Jaguars. They would have only lost 24-10.
Well, you're probably right. But.
So my question is actually about the coaching for the Commanders. I mean, a lot of analysts we've heard say that Ron Rivera has been on the hot seat at certain points after the way the defense has fallen off last year from where they were the year before. And even some of the assistant coaches have kind of been thought of as outdated. Have you seen that kind of thing so far, or have you seen more, modern concepts with that team?
I don't think, first of all, I don't think Ron Rivera's on a hot seat there. I think they respect him and they like him. The defense fell off. Losing Chase Young is big. Not having him on that defense. You have that one pass rushing stud, take him away. That certainly changes things. He wasn't having a good year before he got hurt. So that's certainly an issue. I think before Ron Rivera gets on the hot seat, his defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, will be on the hot seat. Because I think they're generally a well-coached team. They're just not getting the most out of their defensive players. So, they're going to have to change something. But, again, you have to take Chase Young out of that team. That is a big, big change. They've had some other injuries up front. I think I read something today where they had, started the season with 9 guys on the defensive line, and something like 6 of them have been dealing with injuries the first 2 games. So their safety, Cam Curl, was out the first couple of games, which hurt their secondary as well. So they've had some issues to overcome there. And, but I don't think Ron Rivera is in any kind of trouble. I think that the players believe in him. And, I think ownership, and I obviously don't know the Snyders very well, but I believe from everything I've heard there, they believe in Ron Rivera, and they understand that, his first couple of years, they didn't really have the quarterback to win a lot. And, they did squeeze out an NFC East title. Granted, they were only 7-9 that first year, but, that does buy him a little bit of time and a little bit of patience, I think, from the people above him.
Ralph, you look at the NFC right now, and everybody keeps talking about how strong the AFC is and how weak the NFC is. The Vikings, before they got smashed up by the Eagles on Monday, a lot of people thought the Vikings were the best team in the NFC. They didn't show up to a game, or something happened. Maybe they didn't eat their Wheaties or something. And then the Buccaneers, Tom Brady looks very old. I don't know what's going on mentally. That whole fight that broke out, and everybody's blaming Lattimore, but I think it was Mike Evans and Tom Brady that started that whole thing. But that's just my opinion. Even though they're 2-0, they don't really scare me. The Saints don't scare me. We know what the Panthers and the Falcons are. The NFC is fairly weak. The only team that really stands out to me right now, besides the Rams, is the 49ers. And the reason why I think the 49ers stand out is Jimmy G is now behind the helm. It is not a rookie quarterback. And I really feel sad for Trey Lance. I really do. You don't want to see something like that happen to a quarterback and it is out for a significant amount of time. But it's a great story because Jimmy G decided to stay with the 49ers. He took the $7 million with the incentives and now has a chance to go on a run with this 49ers team, a very talented 49ers team. What are your thoughts with Trey Lance, if Trey Lance was behind the helm, or now Jimmy G? Is it a huge difference to have a veteran quarterback of that magnitude?
I think it is. I think anytime you go with a young quarterback in his first year, you're starting over. There are growing pains, and maybe there's a handful of NFL quarterbacks over the years who haven't experienced them, but most of them will struggle a little bit the first time they're starting, and you can't expect them to, lead you to a Super Bowl, lead you to a championship, sometimes not even lead you on a playoff run. Jimmy G's done it before. He's seen more. He'll see defenses. Trey Lance will see a defense for the first time. Jimmy G's probably seen it 7 times already, 10 times already. So that certainly helps. I've always thought he was better than people gave him credit for, and I don't really know what the rush was in San Francisco to move on from him. I think he's a good quarterback. I think a lot of teams in the crazy offseason when they were swapping quarterbacks everywhere should have been more interested if the price was right. So I think this could work out for San Francisco. I think they're a good team. And like you said, it's, every team in the NFC, every team you think of as a contender has flaws. I wouldn't bet against Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, but obviously, their teams both have issues. The Rams have issues as well. The Eagles right now, they look terrific. I don't know what their issue necessarily would be, but they weren't expected to be a Super Bowl contender. So they're kind of the upstarts in this. You can make a case for probably 7 or 8 teams to emerge out of the conference, and with Jimmy G, the 49ers would have to be in that mix.
So what about in terms of, let's say, assuming the Eagles win the division, because they've been looking really good so far. What about for a second wild card team in the NFC East? If you're getting the 6 and the 7 spots, maybe, who would be some other sleeper teams to watch out for in other conferences, or other divisions in the NFC to get those? Could you see a team like Arizona, a team like the Saints maybe contending for those types of spots to fend off the Giants?
I think you could probably pick another 10 teams and put them in that mix right now because they all have issues. The Cardinals, I would have said, okay, absolutely, they're good enough. The Raiders, not the Raiders, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the 49ers, actually.
The Cardinals.
The Cardinals obviously were, they've had their issues so far the first couple of weeks, but they are certainly talented enough to, they're going to be, I think their floor is probably 500. I can't imagine being less than that. And if you're around 500, you're in the wild card race. That's the same as where Washington is going to be. I think with New Orleans defense, it's probably right where they will be as well. I think, Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, they could win the division with him, certainly. If not, them and the Vikings are certainly talented enough to compete for the wild card. And then you get a team that's going to be lucky. Look, the Giants are 2-0. I don't think they're for real. But you look at their schedule, it's not that tough. And if they're playing decent football and Saquon Barkley goes off a little bit and they can develop just a little bit of momentum, could they get to 8 or 9 wins and be in the wild card chase? Certainly, especially if they beat the Cowboys, they're 3-0, they get the Bears next. You rack up 3 or 4 early wins, you will be in the wild card race. So, right now, I think this whole conference is really just incredibly wide open because there's so many flawed teams, and it's not like the AFC where maybe the 6 or 7 best teams in football are in the AFC right now.
We are talking to Fox Sports NFC East reporter Ralph Vacchiano. Last question for me, Ralph. I know you're a really busy guy. Is there any surprises so far that you have seen the last 2 weeks? And being that there has been a couple of surprises and crazy wins by quite a few different teams, where do you see the NFL as the season moves forward? Do you still think the AFC is that dominant? Do you still think that everybody thinks Buffalo is the dominant force right now, the best team in the NFL? Do you think that could change as the season prolongs?
Well, I certainly think it could change. Injuries change everything in the NFL. It's very often who's healthiest later in the season more than anything. We're early. We're just learning about these teams. The first 2 weeks historically tell you absolutely nothing about what's going on in the NFL. So we're really just getting into the serious parts of this. I think probably the thing that jumped out at me as the biggest surprise so far, probably the Colts stinking is probably a big one for me. I really thought, I don't think Matt Ryan is great, but I think they thought he was a better fit for their passing offense. I thought with Jonathan Taylor, they would be able to put up a lot more points than they did. So that's certainly a surprise for me. I think that the Giants 2-0 has to be a surprise. I don't know that I figured that. Looking at the two games, I think they're incredibly lucky in what they did. And, they beat at least one of those teams. I thought the Titans, another surprise, I guess. I thought they would be pretty good. It's impressive, even if it is with a little bit of smoke and mirrors. So, I think that the Bills are probably – I think the Bills are probably the dominant team in the NFL. I think, I picked the Chargers to get to the Super Bowl. I think I picked them against the Buccaneers. I could see the Bills, the Bucks, the Bills, the Chargers, the Chiefs. I think all of them could come out of the AFC. If somebody gets hot late, if the Bills have an injury or two, yeah, things can change. But right now, certainly, you look at the Buffalo Bills, it's hard not to look at them and think, okay, they're the Super Bowl champions right there. They're playing that well, but there's really a long way to go, so who knows?
And also keep in mind, the last two Super Bowl champions, one was a 4 seed, one was a 5 seed. So it doesn't always have to show it in the regular season to show it. All right, so my last question, I know you covered the Giants as well before you started working for Fox Sports for SNY, so you're definitely closer in ties with them. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley at the end of the season, with this current front office, do they stay Giants after this season?
Well, I don't think Daniel Jones will. I think that unless he really lights it up, and if he does, and he looks like a franchise quarterback, they'll give him the franchise tag. But I think that they're itching to move on and bring in their own guy. I think they've seen too many flaws in Daniel Jones, and I think that it's kind of natural. It's like the Jets with, Sam Darnold was, there was a good case to keep him and give him another year, but it was a new regime. They wanted their own people in place. And I think this new regime wants their own quarterback. I think Saquon Barkley's a more difficult guy there. I don't believe this regime values running backs in terms of giving them big contracts. But I think they look at Saquon Barkley, and if he's healthy, I think they think he can have a real impact and could really be a help for a new young quarterback. So I guess if I was guessing, I would say that they would let Daniel Jones go, draft someone to replace him, and give Saquon Barkley the franchise tag and keep him at least one more year.
Ralph, we really appreciate your time, as always. You're very well respected throughout the country from all the different people we talk to, and we really appreciate your time, man.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and we'll hopefully get you on very, very soon, and we'll go into the playoffs and talk a little bit about where you see the playoffs landing with the AFC and the NFC. But we really appreciate you, man.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Take care.